Hey guys, so this is week 5 of our Joshua leadership conversation, and reading chapter 5, coming off of chapter 4. Actually, I gave homework last week. If you know me and you did it, if you don't know me, leave a comment about it. But if you know me, talk to me about it. I'm curious how it went, how it encouraged you, encouraged somebody else. Well, I'd like to hear about it. I'm interested. But reading chapter 5, there is a lot going on here. There is, Israel reestablishes identity through the covenant, through the ceremony of circumcision. Then there's a feast. There is they're able to start growing crops, basically, and then at the end, you see Joshua, who is the leader of the group, right? The leader, bowing, humbling himself and bowing, because he understands, like reverency, right? Bowing to the commander of the Lord's army is what this translation says. So the word comes up just between over and over again, and I'm thinking, I'm reading this, and between the bowing and the circumcision and everything, how it all goes out and the order it goes in, I'm thinking of vulnerability. As people, as leaders, as men especially, it's something that we don't really want to talk about. We don't want to talk about being vulnerable. We don't want to talk about vulnerability. But it is important that we do. It's important that we are vulnerable in our relationships, because it's how we build trust. It's how we build authenticity. It's genuineness when we're vulnerable with one another. When it comes to any manager-employee, discipleship kind of relationship, pastoral, within a community kind of relationship, the leader is usually always the one who's in a position of power, that they're up here and the followers are down here. And so how they communicate and behave will influence the level of trust and the rapport that they can build with each individual that's in the community. And if you're a leader who's closed off, it's likely that the community is going to be closed off too. However, if you're a leader who practices vulnerable leadership, like if you're open and honest, and you're honest about like where you're vulnerable, the floodgates is going to open up for some truly amazing conversations. Or you can be real with one another, and you can start working on those things, and not just talking about your weaknesses or your vulnerabilities, but start, like, the Lord brought us together as a community. The Lord brought us together as a community so we can work together and function each other, because we're each have a part to play, and where you're weak, somebody else can step in and say, I got this, I'm okay here, and vice versa. And as a leader, it's important to recognize that. From having a continuous stream of feedback to understanding what truly motivates your team, or your community, being vulnerable will allow for more open dialogue for everybody that's involved. So I would like to talk about what vulnerable leadership is and how you can best practice it, pretty much. So what is it? For many, vulnerability can be seen as being weak, like I said, especially, however, the opposite tends to be true. While being vulnerable can increase your risk of being hurt emotionally or physically, it can also open up the opportunity to have meaningful conversations that, let's be honest, build authentic relationships. Some of the people that I have led in the most are the people that I have learned the most from. They've seen me at my lowest, and they've loved me at my darkest, and they've spoken into my lives where I needed it. Simple as that. In fact, studies have shown that social connections benefit our mental and our physical health. And it's shameful, I think, that we would only limit this to our personal lives with just a few group of people. I'm not saying that we have to let all of our secrets out to everybody, and we have to, like I said, being vulnerable is risky. It comes with a risk. It comes with a cost. So I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's important that we're vulnerable, though, in the right ways with the right people. For leaders looking to practice vulnerability, it's important to understand that being vulnerable doesn't mean that you need to share your entire life story, everything you're doing, every weakness you have. Waterworks are not a requirement. It's okay to cry with people once in a while, to cry with the community. Just because you're a leader, it's okay to have emotions and have feelings, but waterworks are not a requirement. Rather, it's about understanding where your strengths and your weaknesses lie, where they are. Like, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and being honest about them with the community. Not just with the community, but with yourself as well. Being honest about those things. Let's be honest, a vulnerable leader will ask for help when they need it. Strong leaders are self-aware and confident. They understand that they're not the expert at everything, and that's okay because strong leaders don't need to be. When leaders feel comfortable enough to lean on their community to fill in any gaps, it's an act of vulnerability that strengthens the community. It's because it enables the best person in the community to complete the task, rather than the person with a title, the person who's been there the longest, that's just always done it. It enables the best person, the person God has gifted, the person the Lord has brought here to accomplish that. It doesn't have to be who it's always done, who's always done it. When leaders ask for help, it's not a sign of weakness, but rather one of great leadership when done correctly. Leaders should have a understanding, deep or somewhat of an understanding, right, of the capabilities of each individual that they are leading. If you don't, then your first task as a leader is get to know the people that are following, that are in the community that you're leading, so that when you need help, it's not just like, I need help, that you can go to someone and say, look, I have a need. Our local congregation has a need. Our community has a need, and you're the person for the job. I've seen this gift in you. You're good at it. And then help them, not just throw them out there to it, but hold their hand and lead them through it. Help them be good at something that they're already good at, because they're probably going to be nervous and scared to do it. But yeah, good leader asks for help, and they ask the right people for help. It's not just so-and-so because of a title, or so-and-so because they've always been here or always done it. A good leader knows who they're leading. A vulnerable leader can admit that they're not a superhero and they can't do everything. Leading is an incredibly tough job that requires a lot of time and focus. And if you're a leader, a good one, a bad one, somewhere in between, I don't care. If you're a leader, I commend you. I thank you. It is rough. You get a lot of flack from a lot of people in any organization, whether it's secular, business, or whether it's church community. But many leaders are promoted because they start off as great individual contributors. They serve, they show up, they're a part, they participate, and so they get promoted to this leader, and as a result, they're promoted to a role where they're in charge of leading other people. And usually it's with little to no experience. That's how I started. That's how other people started. I was there. I was faithful. And I had no clue. I still have no clue what just making it up as we go. Lord leading, right? It's especially important for leaders who are still learning how to lead, to be upfront and honest with those they're leading. Not to be like, I'm bad at this, and not to be degraded. Don't be tearing yourself down. But let's be honest, others are watching you lead, right? Like, we can see it. It's not a secret. Like, being honest about, I might need help with this, or I'm not sure about this, or just give me feedback about what you think. How do you think the meeting went? How do you think this is going? You don't have to take every single suggestion. I remember early on in a home group, how do you think the meetings went? I didn't take every suggestion that was made or every criticism that was made. I don't receive that, but a lot of it was good, and it was learning, and I was able to take it and mold it as the leader, and take it and mold it, and I knew we were doing a Bible study, so someone's like, we need to do worship. We could do some worship, or we need to pray more, be more intentional about, okay, cool, yeah. As the leader, how can we make more prayer time in the group? Like, okay, okay. It's important to be asking questions and taking criticism. Again, right people, right way, right? You're not the superhero and you can't do everything. Even if you just are honest about saying, I'm not sure, but let's figure it out as a team, figure it out together. So it's okay to not know everything, right? We know that. We're told that from a young age. It's the same as anybody, as a leader or any person. Like, it's important to not think that you're ever done growing. It's important as a person to never think that it's okay to acknowledge areas where you need growth. Like, look, if there's an area that I'm weak in, I can't pretend like I'm not weak in it. I have to acknowledge that. I need growth in that area, and I need to establish a plan of action to take as to how I'm going to intend to grow in that specific area. I can't just be like, I'm cool, I'm fine, whatever. No, I'm weak in areas, and I need to enlist a set of some kind of plan of action, and I need to be upfront, honest with people. Maybe not everybody. Some people will use it against me, but with some people, to a degree, I need to be vulnerable with people about, look, I'm not great at this, so can you help me? Or, not great at this, like, I'm unsure. How do you think I did? Or what do you think could I change? Or what do you think? Even as a leader, so be honest with yourself and with others. It's going to make a difference. How to practice vulnerable leadership, just a few simple ways. Because vulnerable leadership isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. First off, you open up. You open up as a leader. You just open up. If you want your community to open up to you, you'll need to open up first. Remember that you're in the position of power as a leader, right? In that relationship. So it can be very intimidating for somebody to open up to you because you're already up here. As dumb as it sounds, it's true. You are. As the leader and as the person in power, you're ultimately setting the tone for how you communicate with one another. When you open up, you're setting the tone of what's open, what's honest communication. You're the one setting that pace. Opening up doesn't have to be this big secret revealing process behind closed doors, or text message or email, or whatever it is the process is you've established. Doesn't have to be no big lengthy thing, but you have to establish it. It can be as simple as sharing challenges as you face them together, as you share life together, as you walk the spiritual process together, in a church setting. It can also be just talking about things that you're incredibly proud of. Ministry tasks you've done together, or something you've led together. It doesn't have to always be. You're the one that sets the pace. You have to open up first, and you're the one that starts the dialogue for communication in your community, because you're the one that's the person of power, whether you like it or not. That's who you are. The second point, you have to create a psychological safe space as you lead, and that's going to create an emotional and a spiritual safe space too. This is why it's important. It's not about snowflakes. It's not about people. It's important because of our culture right now. When you foster a culture of psychological safety, you proactively create a space for community members to feel safe sharing ideas, for feedback to be spoken, and for people to just generally be themselves. I don't have to explain why that's important, and why that needs to be put into practice. Now, obviously, there's some things that maybe they shouldn't be themselves about, but it's important that people are comfortable to be able to share and communicate in meetings, or communicate on the phone with you, or to be able to approach you so that you're not unapproachable. Real quick though, when I say psychological safety, it's a term that was defined originally by Amy Edmondson, a Harvard business professor. And psychological safety is defined as a shared belief held by members of a team that the team culture is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. She defines it as a sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. So in a nutshell, psychological safety means everyone on the team will support and listen to one another in a respectful manner. Dude, man, that's Ephesians 4:29, right? Everyone's going to speak. Every word that comes out of their mouth is going to be used to edify the body, to build up the body, not to tear down. Everybody has a voice. Everybody's going to use the voice. Everybody's going to speak, and it's going to build up the body. Ideas, questions, concerns, criticisms, it's all coming out. It's okay, because it's all going to be in a respectful way. Why does psychological safety matter? So I heard about this. It's Project Aristotle. And I first heard about Project Aristotle when I was in college. And I first read it and I rolled my eyes at it. But it's a Google team did a research project about why psychological safety matters. And the research team at Google found that when it comes to team work in general, Project Aristotle found that what really mattered was less about who was on the team and more about how the team worked together. It doesn't matter who you bring together, it's how they work together. That's right, psychological safety. As the team from Google puts it, in a team with high psychological safety, teammates feel safe to take risks around their team. They feel confident that no one on the team will embarrass or punish anyone else for admitting a mistake, making a mistake, asking a question, or offering a new idea. This is important. This is a place where people can participate comfortably, feel like they're a part of something, and actively be engaged. Because they're not going to be shunned or humiliated or discouraged. Even if it's wrong, even if it's not right, even if it is a mistake, their voice will be heard, and they're as a person, they're going to be looked at as a person. When everyone on the team puts in the effort to create a psychologically safe space, it allows for open, honest communication. Doesn't mean everything that comes at them is going to be used in the project, right? Not everything that is said, every idea, criticism, or word that's spoken, do we go, that's gold. No. Some things you got to filter out, and it's all got to be run by the Word of God. Not everything in a church setting is always of the Lord. Like, people are people, and we say some dumb things sometimes. But when you let people feel like they're people because they're people, and God made them in His image, and they have purpose and value because that's who they are, and you open up to them and you communicate to them, and you don't shut them out because you're a person who has an attitude, or you're a person who because if you have a psychological safe space for people to feel welcomed, they're going to participate and engage. And then when you do things, they're going to be a part of the things that you do. So they're going to feel like they're a part and not a part. I mean, open, honest communication, right? Who doesn't want that? How do you practice psychological safety? It's not something that happens in a day, right? It's something leaders should be doing every single day. Three ways in which you can start practicing psychological safety today. As a leader, lead by example. You listen to your community. Just because you're in a position of power doesn't mean your voice is the only one that matters. React with respect when people speak up. Don't lash out. Don't embarrass them. Rather encourage this behavior, because it's only going to make your community stronger. That doesn't mean everything that's said is right. As the leader, you have to decipher the stuff that's coming in. You have to be accountable for what is being, utilized within the community. You have to shut down things that are tearing down. That's not building up or edifying. It's not Ephesians 4:29ing the community. But as a leader, you need to lead by example and listen to your community. Let them have a psychological safe space. The second point, focus less on pointing fingers and more on solving problems. If something goes wrong, look, it's going to. Anybody's done anything for any amount of time will know things are going to go wrong. Don't focus your energy on whose fault it was. Instead, focus on how the community can work together to fix the problem, find a solution, and come out stronger together. We're pointing fingers. Quit criticizing. Find a solution as together. Quit dividing and making wedges. And then the last one is, you got to be vulnerable. You got to set the tone with your team, within the community. Set the tone. Share hardships, challenges, struggles, wins, achievements, successes. Share things. It's not only okay. Let people know that it's not only okay, but also it's encouraged to do. Like I said, man, you can't expect your team to open up if you don't open up first. You've got to set the pace. You got to lead in a way they can follow. So this is more important. That's not just in a community setting and big, large crowds. That's important, but you gotta make one-on-ones a place where sharing is encouraged. Personal meetings, just like we mentioned earlier, psychological safety is where it's high, where it's a good thing. It's easier for your community to open up to you because they feel safe to do so. If you're not sure how to gauge the level of psychological safety in your community, think about the following. Just ask yourself these questions if you're not sure how to gauge it. Are your one-on-one meetings very quiet? Are your small group meetings very quiet? Or is it like pulling teeth to get people to participate in things? I'm with the exception of those who are there's specific few that are always quiet in the back doing their own thing. But are your meetings very quiet? Is it like pulling teeth to get people to be engaged, participate? Because they might not be a psychologically safe environment for people to feel comfortable to participate. Or on the flip side, do people openly speak up and share their thoughts, challenges, and ideas? Are they comfortable enough to make a mistake in your presence around other people because people might judge them? Because if they are, then it might be a psychologically safe environment and they might participate because they know that you're a type of leader that's going to make sure that they are safe for making a mistake, because we're people and we always make mistakes. That's what we do. That's what they did. And every single time, as we see in chapter 2, verse 2, Israel is reestablished identity through a circumcision. God does not disown us. He finds a way through covenant all the way from the beginning to Jesus to let us know that we're going to mess up and he loves us enough to give us a way out. As leaders, our community is going to frustrate us, and we have to still open up and give them a psychologically safe place, a place where they can listen and participate and be encouraged to be a part. If we don't do that, then we might as well be by ourselves doing everything all the time, because no one's going to ever want to be a part of anything that we're leading, because they're not going to feel comfortable. They're not going to feel safe. Think about it like this. How much effort does a person have to put in every time they want to share an idea with you, a piece of, give you feedback, or even talk about a challenge that they're struggling with? If they need to spend a ridiculously amount of time preparing emotionally, or just preparing in general, and how they communicate that feedback to you, they're likely not going to share it with you. It's going to be a struggle. Instead, they're going to keep it to themselves. They're going to be frustrated. They're going to be bottling it up, and it's going to fester. And you're going to be like, "Why didn't you talk to me?" And they're going to be like, "It's going to damage your relationship." That's what's going to happen. Think about it from the point of view of the community members. How much effort does a person have to put in to share feedback with you? someone when they share something with you, how much are you challenging them? Their feedback. Are you getting defensive? Are you shooting down their ideas before they even finish their statements? Are you not concerned? Are you walking away? Are you too busy to hear their thoughts? The things that are keeping them up at night, the things that are making, things that are so important to them, are you like, that's dumb? They're not going to come to you anymore. They're not going to participate with you. They're not going to listen to you because they're like, well, you don't care about me. Now, we got to remember that some challenges are good, especially when new ideas are brought up. Like, not everything can be taken in. You have to ensure that, like, the best idea wins, the best thought wins, regardless of who pitched it. Like, it's not about, like, so-and-so's been here, or so-and-so's got a title, or so-and-so, However, not every idea is going to be gold. You're going to hear thoughts and criticisms and things that they're just, somebody's being an idiot, and you got to decipher that as a leader. Criticisms and ideas and thoughts, and you got to take it to the word, and you got to throw it, and you got to keep what's good and throw what's not good. But if someone is sharing their feelings with you, such as being frustrated about something, you can't ignore it. Like, listen, so if somebody came to you and said they're frustrated because you keep interrupting them, are you going to cut them off in mid-sentence and be like, I don't do that, and walk away? Probably not, because if you did, you'd be a horrible person. It's the same idea when they're coming to you with an idea, and they're like, it's a great idea, and you're like, yeah, it's horrible. If you do that to somebody else, even if you don't say it's horrible, if your body language says that, or your stance, the way you reply, the words, the facial expressions, it's about caring and loving the people the Lord brought to you in your community. They need a psychological safe space, an environment where they feel comfortable enough to be engaged in the community that the Lord brought them to begin with. He gave them a community to come to be a part of and participate in, and He's put you over it as the leader to make sure that they're able to do so. That's pretty much all that it boils down to. That's really all it boils down to. Being vulnerable with your community is a great way to continue to build trust as a whole, corporately, and also individually. It also builds a supportive community culture within the organization, within the congregation, within the building, which will help propel your vision, your dream forward. If you don't have that vulnerability, if you don't have that safe space, if you don't have that, everything's going to be dead in the water. It's got to be genuine. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be real. It's got to be from a vulnerable place. As I'm reading that, that's... So let's get to Joshua. Let's learn about Joshua as a leader, how the Israelites made it. Chapter 5, like I said, when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings who lived along the Mediterranean coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan River so the people of Israel could cross, they lost heart and were paralyzed with fear because of them. At that time the Lord told Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the second generation of Israelites. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the entire male population of Israel at Gibeath Haraloth. Joshua had to circumcise them because all the men who were old enough to fight in battle when they left Egypt had all been circumcised, but none of those born after the Exodus during the years in the wilderness had been circumcised. The Israelites had traveled in the wilderness for 40 years until all the men who were old enough to fight in battle when they left Egypt had died. For they had disobeyed the Lord, and the Lord vowed He would not let them enter the land He had sworn to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So Joshua circumcised their sons, those who had grown up to take their fathers' places, for they had not been circumcised on the way to the promised land. After all the males had been circumcised, they rested in the camp until they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the shame of your slavery in Egypt." So that place has been called Gilgal to this day. I've rolled away the shame. Like, being vulnerable. Like, there was shame, but I've rolled it away, right? While the Israelites were camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, they celebrated Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the first month. The very next day they began to eat unleavened bread and roasted grain harvested from the land. No manna appeared on the day they first ate from the crops of the land, and it was never seen again. So from that time on, the Israelites ate from the crops of Canaan. When Joshua was near the town of Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, "Are you friend or are you foe?" "Neither one," he replied. "I am the commander of the Lord's army." At this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. "I am at your command," Joshua said. "What do you want your servant to do?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did as he was told. Joshua sees a man with a sword drawn, and he bows. That's vulnerable. I'm reading this, and they circumcised the Israelites after they passed the Jordan. The river was raised, like it was up on the shores, right? And that's a surgery. Probably hurt. These are men battling, not children. Like, it probably hurt. If they, in my mind, if they'd have done this on this side, this is the river, they'd done on this side, they'd had some kind of protection from all these enemies. Knew they were coming. Rahab told them, like, "We're afraid. God's with you." Like, word got out. The Jordan could have been some kind of protection because of the way it was flowing. But God's like, "I'm going to split up the Jordan. You're going to walk across it. And when you're over here, now I want you to just do the circumcision." Everything about this is like, man, if I wasn't, I'd be like, it's vulnerability, vulnerability, vulnerability. It's important as leaders, as people, that we are open and honest, and being vulnerable with one another. So the Joshua overview, the devotional part, starts out with word reaching the kings of the Amorites and the Canaanite kings. You know how the Lord dried up the water in the Jordan so the Israelites could cross. When the word reached the kings, we're told here that they were alarmed and their courage failed them. Just at the simple thought that the Israelites were still advancing, that they weren't stopping, that they were still being led by the Lord, right? It's interesting to think about how quickly the word got out to the kings of how the Lord helped them. It's also like they also acknowledged him in their midst, and they were discouraged at how powerful he is and that he was working among them. Like it says here, like, when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan, all the Canaanite kings who lived along the Mediterranean coast, heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan River. These are the Israelites' enemies. Heard what the Lord did for them, and it's not... So the Israelites acknowledged him and walked with him, and the enemies of the Israelites, enemies of the Lord, was like, man, he's real. He's with them. His presence is real with them. They acknowledged him in their midst. Gave him glory for that. You know? I thought that was cool too, to point out. And then was discouraged at how powerful he is, because like Israelites are still coming, right? Coming to kill them, coming to take the land. But I'm reminded of how when other people, co-workers, friend, foe, however, see the Lord work through our lives, that there's no question that he gets the glory. We need to testify with our mouth, but even if we don't, like when the Lord works in our lives, other people sees that. And people cannot excuse the work that the Lord is doing. They can't. When he's doing the things that only he can do, people see that. They can't not see that. Even the trivial things. We need to remember to look for him and acknowledge his presence in our lives, because it is so obvious to us and others, and he gets the credit for it. So in verse 2, it talks about Joshua taking the flint knives for circumcision. The reason is, because the males who were circumcised at this point fought bravely, died in battle along the way, and they had not yet had an opportunity to stop to circumcise the younger men yet. As we know, circumcision is a way that God, calls his people to distinguish them apart from those around them. Like I said, it's reestablishing covenant with Israel. This is something that would give them an identity, that would once again distinguish them again as God's people. And just as a thought, like, we should be walking around, distinguishing ourselves apart from those around us. We should look different. We should look like God's people. We should look like Christ. We should. Our identity should be found in Christ, Jesus Christ, and others should see that in us, in the way that we work, the way that we walk, the way that we talk, the way that we're vulnerable with other people, in our faults, in our successes, in our communication. It's important. It's so important in our communities, wherever we go, our spheres of influences that we do. It's important. Verse 6 speaks towards that the original Israelites were promised not to enter the promised land because they didn't listen to the Lord. So the promise was given to the grandchildren. The Lord kept his promise generationally. In verse 12, it's important to remember that. But in verse 12, the Israelites celebrated their first Passover in the land. They ate the generational promise we see was kept, and so in verse 12 they eat produce from the land. Like, they no longer ate manna from heaven as they were in the desert. The manna that they received in the desert stopped coming altogether, and now they were able to live off crops from the land of Canaan. So think about it like this. So this is what I gathered from that. The Lord brought them to this land, allowed the crops and the vegetation to grow, and the Lord kept his promise generationally, like from a gap of period, right? I'm imagining, though, even though the Lord kept his promise, the Israelites at this point now probably had to take care of the crops, right? And I'm thinking of how often we as people sit back and expect the Lord to just do everything. Like, at one point, manna just fell from heaven, and now he's like, here's your land, here's your crops, here's your, they had to take care of it. They had to harvest it, right? I'm assuming, I would assume. But how often we sit back and expect the Lord to just do everything for us. Like, we know that he does allow everything, right? And he orchestrates things in a way that only he can do. But as he opens doors for us, like, we still have to walk through them ourselves. The Lord's going to give us wisdom and strength to walk through them, and he will walk through them with us. He's never going to leave us or forsake us, but he wants us to trust him enough to walk through them ourselves. Like, that's why we got to have faith in him and his plan, and trust the Holy Spirit as the Holy Spirit's prompting us towards the paths that he's choosing us to go through, because he brought them to this place. He kept his promise. He's always going to keep his promises. If you have a problem and you're doubting it, he will keep his promise. But they had to do some work themselves here. They had the crops. In order to eat the crops, they had to take care of the crops. They had to harvest the crops. They had to cook the crops. They had to eat the crops in order to celebrate God's promise. That's the same way. God's going to bring you to a place, and he's going to give you everything you need, and you're going to have to work it. You have to be a good steward of it. You have to work with it. And we have to remember that, because sometimes we're just sitting here like, Lord, do something. And he's like, it's all around you. You're not moving. You get up and take your mat and walk. And you're like, when you do something, God, when you do something, Lord, come on, Jesus. And you're like, and he's like, okay. I've already given you everything you need. You're just sitting there, but whatever, I think it's important that we remember that. Sometimes we got to get up and do with what he's already given us, because he's given us everything we need to accomplish what he's brought us to do. And then it ends in verse 13 where Joshua was confronted by a man with a sword drawn and ready. And Joshua asked him if he's one of them or one, friend or foe, right? And the man says, neither. I'm neither. And, says, I'm here as the commander of the Lord's army. And Joshua immediately acknowledges, fell to his knees, acknowledges the authority of this man sent from heaven. And the man instructed Joshua to take off his shoes because he was standing on the holy ground. So Joshua then removed his sandals. Like, it is so important that we acknowledge the authority of God in our lives. Just here, Joshua is the leader. Now, granted, this was, commander of the Lord's armies, but Joshua's bowing because he knew there was authority greater. As leaders, we need to bow our hearts to what is greater, to that which is greater, right? Kick off our sandals on holy ground once in a while and just bow our hearts. I think it's important. That's pretty much all I have today. I do want to pray with you before I go, but that's all I got today. I know it went longer today, but I think it's a good one. I think it's important about our communication, about our vulnerability. So I'm going to close with a prayer and then go from there. So, dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for the way you keep your promises to us. Even if it takes us longer to get with your plan for our lives, Lord, I thank you for the way you orchestrate things on our behalf and lead us through our own wilderness journeys to get to where you want us to be. Lord, I thank you for speaking to us and teaching us while being sovereign in our lives. We know that this earth and everything in it belongs to you. I thank you for how you provide for us, even when you require us to work a little for it, or to just be a good steward of the things you hand to us from on high, Lord. I thank you for your presence that's always with us, and for the way that you shelter us with your presence. You go before us, and you graft us into your body, and you give us a whole new identity that is now found in you, Lord. I thank you for the new life that we have in you. Lord, help us acknowledge your presence and strip off our sandals. Remove anything off ourselves that would interrupt us from standing in your presence, hearing your voice, and submitting ourselves and kneeling in your presence, Lord. Lord, help us just acknowledge who you are in our lives. Help us be vulnerable where we need to be vulnerable, communicate with who we need to be communicating with, and do it in the right ways, with the right people in the right ways, Lord, that we could be genuine and authentic and real, and that we could show you in our lives, and that we could just come together as the community, how you'd want us to come together in the community, Father. That we could lead and follow where we're supposed to lead and follow and be a good representation of you, how you've wanted us to from day one, how we're supposed to, bold with integrity, humble, servants of you. Lord, we thank you for everything you're doing, everything you have done, and everything you are going to do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.